How much is Christmas historic denialism? Because you write part of the meaning of Christmas is in repetition, but a very particular form of repetition, a repetition of forgetting and remembering, of remembering and misremembering. It is this cycle of death and renewal that is the heart of Christmas. It allows us an illusion of stability, of long-established communities, a way to believe in an imagined past when it was safe for children to play in the street, when no one locked their doors and everybody knew their neighbors, all the while unconsciously omitting the less desirable parts of those times. So how much is Christmas historical denialism? How much does it allow us to deny our real past?
Oh, exactly the same way the other 364 days of the year do. The same way you have people who say, oh, we want to go back to those happy times of the 1950s, which were happy unless you were fussed about things like minimum wage or segregation or Jim Crow laws or, drinking water that wasn't actually clean. We practice historical denialism every day of our lives. We have to. It's the way we survive.
You write that what they mean is that they miss what we understand, emotively to be the central core of the holiday, not the lives we have, but the lives we would like to have in a world where family, religion, personal and social relationships are built on firm foundations. How much is Christmas about giving us a false sense of stability and firm foundations?
I don't think it's false as such. I think we use these beliefs to bolster up our image of the world we live in so that we can keep going every day. If we looked around and saw the real horrors that exist every day, everywhere, we would all just throw up our hands in despair. So we tell ourselves stories, whether it is the story of our own life, so we create a narrative to give a sense of meaning to our lives, or whether it is the story of our society, which Christmas is part of that story. We create these so that we can function.
Is Christmas, if we are looking for hope in our past instead of in our future, is Christmas more reactionary instead of progressive?
I think Christmas is neutral. I think it's the people who market who make those decisions. So I think reactionary people's Christmas is reactionary. Progressive people's Christmas is progressive. I think that Christmas itself is value neutral. I don't think that we can make those claims for it.
You also point out all the inconsistencies around the stories in the Gospels, in, I believe, Luke and Matthew, where they're talking about the birth of Christ and how there's sheep in the field, so it can't be December 25th, how it's happening during a tax system that would be under Herod, but actually it didn't happen under Herod, how there seems to be all these historical inconsistencies with the story of Christ's birth being on December 25th. To you, what explains why, if there's all these obvious and blatant inconsistencies, historical inconsistencies that can be brought up rather easily, to you, what explains why the church selected December 25th then to be Christmas?
Well, I think they selected it for some of the same reasons that I mentioned, that Christmas is a logical time for a party, the seasonal reasons. And because of those reasons, you also have, therefore, pre-Christian, a clutch of holidays, which the celebration of which leak into what later became the Christmas celebration. So you have, as you mentioned much earlier, Saturnalia, which is slightly before the solstice. You had after it, as you also mentioned, the calends, the Roman New Year, which run from the 1st to the 3rd of January. And you had on the 25th itself, you had the birth of the unconquerable sun, the birth of the god Mithras, which was, by the end of the Roman Empire, the predominant religion of the Roman Empire. We don't know a lot about Mithraism, but we do know that on the 25th of December, the god Mithras is born in a cave, witnessed by two shepherds. And indeed, one of the proto-Gospels, not one of the four Gospels, but one of the others, also claims that Christ is born in a cave. And of course, we know about the shepherds. So what the church does, as I said, the church has historically co-opted the elements that are not Christian and grafted them on to use them, whether it's the Christmas tree in Sunday schools or, in this case, much more core, the nativity itself. They chose the day of the nativity to be the day that people were already used to celebrating the birth of a god.
We have been speaking with Judith Flanders. She is author of Christmas, a Biography. You can find the bibliography, chapter notes, primary sources, and secondary sources for Christmas, a Biography at christmas-biography.com. Follow Judith on Twitter at Judith Flanders. Find out more at judithflanders.co.uk. Judith, we have one last question for you, and as we do with all of our guests, our final question is the question from hell, the question we might hate to ask, you might hate to answer, or our audience is going to hate your response. You quote Scrooge's nephew, Fred, telling Scrooge, "Christmas is a good time, a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time. The only time I know of in the long calendar of the year when men and women seem by one consent to open their shut-up hearts freely and to think of people below them as if they really were fellow passengers to the grave, and not another race of creatures bound on other journeys. And therefore, Uncle, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe that it has done me good and will do me good, and I say, God bless it." How much do you think Christmas is penance for any collective guilt we may have for the way we act throughout the year? How much does Christmas allow us to be Scrooges the rest of the year?
That's an interesting question. One of the things that's so interesting about that Dickens passage, which, by the way, makes me cry every time I read it, is the bit that's never in the movie adaptations, is where he says, "We're fellow passengers to the grave." Dickens is very dark. This is not about, oh, look at all the happy people. We're fellow passengers to the grave. So for God's sakes, let us help people en route, is what he is telling us. No one is going to get out of here alive. And I think that Dickens' much darker message is one that we really don't want to hear. So in that sense, I think we do disregard the real meaning of Christmas for the superficial meaning of Christmas far more often than perhaps Dickens would have hoped for.